My name is Kayla Jordan, and I just graduated with my MBA. I came home to find my parents gave the family business I built to my sister Simone. My mother looked at my diploma and said, "That's nice, dear, but you're just good with your hands, not your brain." So I stopped my 60-hour unpaid weeks at the workshop. When my father called 3 days later panicking about our biggest client, I just let it ring. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you know that hands, without a brain, can still bring an entire empire to its knees. The party was deafening. Hundreds of Atlanta's elite politicians and business owners mingled in the grand ballroom of my parents' Buckhead estate. The air smelled like money gardenias and roasted lamb. I clutched the heavy cardstock of my diploma, the embossed letters of Master of Business Administration pressing into my palm. It had taken me 10 years of relentless work to earn this. 10 years of running my father's workshop during the day and taking classes at night, all for this moment. I finally spotted my mother Valerie near the orchestra holding court with Senator Thompson's wife. She looked magnificent in a dark blue gown, the matriarch of Jordan Designs. "Mom," I said, my voice tight with excitement. I held up the diploma. "I did it, with honors." Valerie didn't even glance at the diploma. Her eyes scanned the room over my shoulder. "Oh, that's wonderful, Kayla. Truly. Now be a dear and grab that tray of champagne, will you? The catering staff is just overwhelmed." She gestured toward a server's station where a heavy silver tray was waiting. I froze. My hand still holding the MBA was suddenly empty, and the other was being pushed toward a tray of flutes. "Mom, We'll talk about your degree later," she said dismissively. "Right now, guests are thirsty. Don't make a scene." Before I could respond, my mother's entire demeanor changed. Her face lit up with a blinding smile. "Simone?" There she is. My younger sister Simone descended the grand staircase. She wasn't just wearing a dress. She was making an entrance. It was a custom-made, shimmering gold gown that probably cost more than my first car. At 28, Simone was the creative genius of the family. She had graduated from Parsons and was the designated face of Jordan Designs. Valerie rushed past me, nearly knocking the diploma from my hand to embrace her golden child. "Simone, darling, you look breathtaking." "Senator Thompson was just asking about your design concept for the mayor's gala." Simone laughed, a light, airy sound that always grated on my nerves. "Oh, it's nothing, Mama. Just a little something I sketched out." I watched them, the scene painfully familiar. Simone the brain, Kayla the hands. I remembered all the nights I was the one sketching, hunched over the CNC machine, programming the cuts, my hands raw and blistered from stretching fabric over complex frames. Simone would come in, snap a photo for her Instagram, suggest changing the color from teal to turquoise, and then take credit for the entire concept at the client meeting. For 10 years I had endured this. I ran the workshop, managed the craftsmen, sourced the materials, and handled the logistics. I did it all without a single paycheck, putting in 60-hour weeks. The deal I'd struck with my father David echoed in my head. "Get your MBA, Kayla. Show me you have the business sense and the company is yours to lead. Your sweat is your equity." It was a lie. This party wasn't for my graduation. It was a coronation for her. I looked across the room and saw Simone's husband Ryan. He was a slick, white venture capitalist from Buckhead, and he had always looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. He caught my eye, now raised his glass in a mock toast and smirked. He knew, they all knew, that smirk was the final cut. It told me this wasn't an oversight. It was a decision. I didn't take the champagne tray. I didn't say another word. I walked straight past my mother and sister, ignoring their surprised looks, and headed for the one room that always felt like a war room, my father's study. I found him standing by the window smoking a celebratory cigar. David Jordan, the man who built this company on the motto, "Legacy is everything." "Kayla," he said, turning. "Good, you're here. We need to discuss your new role." "You mean my role as a waitress?" I asked, my voice cold. He frowned. Your mother was just… She's busy. Don't be sensitive. You gave the company to Simone, I stated. It wasn't a question. David looked uncomfortable, which meant it was true. Simone is the president, yes. She has the vision. She's the face we need. But you're the backbone. You'll be the chief of operations. You'll run the workshop. It's the perfect partnership. A partnership? I repeated the word tasting like ash. You mean she gets the title, the salary, and the credit, and I get to keep working 60 hours a week for free in the studio apartment above the garage? The one, by the way, that I pay utilities for out of my own pocket. You're being dramatic. He snapped, his patience gone. This is what's best for the Jordan legacy. The applause was deafening. Ryan kissed Simone passionately on the cheek as she preened, accepting the congratulations. My mother Valerie looked like she was weeping with joy. I didn't hear any of it. The sound in my ears was a high-pitched ringing, blocking out the orchestra, the laughter, the clinking glasses. This wasn't a party for my graduation. It was a public execution of our agreement. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow, so sharp and clear it felt like yesterday. I wasn't 30. I was 20, standing in the dusty, cavernous space of the original workshop. My father David had his hand on my shoulder, his face grim. The bank won't give me the expansion loan, Kayla, he'd said, his voice heavy with defeat. I'll do it, Dad. I promised, my voice filled with a naive determination. I'll run the workshop. I'll learn the new machines. I'll manage production. You won't have to pay me. On one condition, I said. I'll work for free. My sweat is my equity. I'll get my MBA at night. And when I graduate, we're 50-50 partners. I'll lead the company. He had agreed instantly. 10 years. 10 years of 60-hour unpaid weeks. 10 years of inhaling sawdust and fiberglass, my hands raw and blistered. 10 years of mastering the CNC router and the 3D laser cutter while Simone was at parties studying art history. All for this moment. All for him to give our legacy to Simone. The ringing in my ears stopped, replaced by a cold, sharp rage. I pushed through the crowd of guests. People tried to stop me, to congratulate me on my MBA, but I must have looked insane, a woman in a cap and gown marching through a party with a look of thunder on her face. I saw David and Valerie pulling Simone and Ryan into the library for a private toast, their inner circle. I pushed the heavy oak door open so hard it banged against the wall, silencing their laughter. Kayla, Valerie snapped, startled. What is the meaning of this? We are having a private family moment. This is a family moment, I said, my voice shaking but dangerously low. What was that out there, Dad? David stiffened, putting his champagne glass down. He hated being challenged. That was an announcement about the future of my company. Our company, I corrected. What about our deal? The 10 years, the MBA. The 50% equity. I ran that workshop. I built the production side of this company. I am the reason you have a company to give away. Ryan, Simone's husband, stepped forward, his slick venture capitalist smile in place. Now listen, Kayla. This is just business. You can't really expect… Quiet, Ryan, Valerie said, her voice dropping to an icy calm. She turned to me, her eyes devoid of any maternal warmth. Kayla, you need to be realistic. Realistic? I whispered, incredulous. I just gave you 10 years of my life. Yes, Valerie said, and we appreciate your effort. But let's be honest. Simone has the vision. She has the taste. She is the brain. She stepped closer, her gaze lingering on my hands. You're good with your hands. She said the words, a stunning, brutal dismissal. You're a wonderful technician. You execute. You build. But a company, Kayla, a legacy, needs a brain to lead it, not just hands. The words just hands hung in the air. I looked at my father, who was nodding in agreement. I looked at Simone, who was straightening her designer dress, her confidence restored. And I looked at Ryan, who was smirking again. Hands, I repeated softly. I see. I nodded slowly, a strange, terrifying calm settling over me. I walked over to my father's expensive mahogany desk, which sat in the corner of the library. "Kayla, don't be so dramatic," my mother started, but I held up one hand. I placed my MBA diploma on the desk. "You're absolutely right, Mom," I said, my voice now devoid of all emotion. "A company certainly does need its hands. But you have a new president now. She's the brain. I'm sure she can handle it." I turned and walked out of the library, leaving them standing there. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I walked back through the party, my head held high, my graduation gown flowing behind me. I walked straight past the laughing guests and out the front door. As I left, I saw my family huddled by the library door, already closing ranks. Valerie and Simone just shrugged. I heard my mother say, "Oh, let her have her tantrum. She'll be back on Monday. She has nowhere else to go." Ryan let out a short, cruel laugh. "Exactly. Where are the hands gonna go without the brain to tell them what to do?" I got into my 10-year-old car and didn't look back. They thought I was throwing a tantrum. They thought I was weak. They had forgotten that hands can do more than just build. They can also tear everything down. But Monday morning came. The workshop of Jordan Designs was usually alive by 7 a.m. The hum of the industrial HVAC system, the sharp scent of cut wood, the hiss of the laser cutter, the sound of Miguel, our master carpenter, arguing with Aisha, our lead fabric specialist, about the best way to rig a suspension. Today there was only silence. Simone and Ryan arrived at 9:30, lattes in hand, dressed for an executive meeting, not a workshop. Simone swiped her keycard. The door beeped, but the heavy steel-plated door didn't buzz open. "What the hell?" she muttered, fumbling with the card again. Ryan, impatient, used his own master key to manually unlock the deadbolt. "Kayla probably locked it out of spite," he said, pushing the door open. "So childish." They stepped inside. The massive space was cold and dark. The security lights were on, but the main bay lights were off. Not a single machine was running. "Kayla!" Simone called out, her voice echoing in the cavernous room. "Kayla, this isn't funny." No one answered. Ryan sighed, annoyed. "Fine. She's making a point. Where's her little team?" He strode through the workshop, his polished Italian loafers clicking on the concrete floor. He passed the 3D printing station, empty. The CNC routing bay, empty. The paint and finishing booth, dark. "Where is Miguel?" Simone asked, her voice starting to get high-pitched. "Where is Aisha? Where is Marcus? Did Kayla give them the day off?" "She probably told them all to strike like some sort of union boss," Ryan sneered. "How pathetic. She thinks we can't run this place for one day without her." He walked over to the main control panel for the workshop, a complex board of switches and screens that I had custom built. He flipped 3 switches. Nothing happened except for a high-pitched beep. "How do you turn the damn lights on?" he grumbled. "It doesn't matter," Simone said, her voice shaking. I can just call them. They work for the company, not for her." She pulled out her phone and dialed Miguel's number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried Aisha. Straight to voicemail. She tried Marcus. The line had been disconnected. "What is going on?" she whispered, the panic finally breaking through. "They'll show up," Ryan insisted, though he now looked worried. "They have to. They have jobs." "Do they?" I said from the landing of my studio apartment above. They both jumped, startled. I was leaning on the railing, holding a moving box. "Miguel and Aisha are independent contractors just like me. And Marcus, I got him this job as a favor. His loyalty is to me, not to Jordan Designs. As of 8 a.m. this morning, they all accepted positions at my new company." "New company?" Simone looked completely lost. "What are you talking about?" Before I could answer, Simone's phone blared to life. The caller ID flashed on the screen, and I saw her blood run cold. Ms. Devereaux, the mayor's gala. The biggest event of the year. Our most important, most volatile, and most powerful client. Simone looked from the phone to me to Ryan, her hand trembling. She had to answer. She forced a bright professional tone into her voice. Ms. Devereaux, good morning. So wonderful to hear from. Ms. Devereaux's voice was like steel, so loud I could hear it from the landing. Simone, it's 10 a.m. I'm looking at my watch. I don't have the progress photos for the gala centerpiece. Kayla always sends them at 9 on the dot. Where is my update? Yes, Ms. Devereaux, of course. Simone said, her voice a sickly sweet melody of professionalism. I could see her pacing frantically in the dark workshop, her phone pressed to her ear. The photos are just uploading. The connection here in the workshop is a little slow. You'll have them in the next 5 minutes, I promise. She hung up and stared at Ryan, her eyes wide with terror. 5 minutes? What are we going to do? We don't even have the lights on. Ryan, ever the arrogant investor, scoffed. Calm down. It's a machine. How hard can it be? Kayla just liked to make it seem complicated, so she looked important. Where's the on switch? He strode over to the main CNC router, the massive 6-axis machine that I had spent months programming for the Devereaux Gala. It was my masterpiece of engineering and design. Simone, for her part, ran to the 3D laser cutter, a machine so delicate it required calibration every morning. I think it's this one, Simone said, pressing a large green button on the laser cutter's interface. The machine whirred to life, but instead of the ready light, a red error message flashed in German. What does Fehlerausrichtung mean? She yelled. How should I know? Ryan snapped. He was at the main control panel for the CNC, which I had custom wired to the building's main power grid. This is ridiculous. It's just a glorified saw. He bypassed the startup sequence I had programmed and hit the main emergency power toggle, trying to force it on. There was a sound like a gunshot. A bright blue flash erupted from the panel, followed by the sickening smell of burning electronics and melting plastic. A massive custom-ordered block of imported acrylic, valued at $5,000 and sitting on the CNC bed, cracked from top to bottom. The entire workshop plunged into darkness as the main breaker tripped, leaving only the red glow of the German error message on the laser cutter's screen. You broke it! Simone shrieked, her voice echoing in the sudden deafening silence. Ryan, you broke it! That was the last piece of acrylic we had for the centerpiece. As Simone stared at the ruined, cracked block, the memory must have hit her. I know it did. She remembered 3 months ago, the governor's ball. The client had demanded an 8-foot suspended ice-like sculpture. It was a design Simone had sketched on a napkin and promised without consulting me. It was structurally impossible. I had re-engineered it from scratch, spending 3 consecutive nights in the workshop welding a steel armature and hand-molding resin, sleeping in 20-minute naps on the floor. When I was finally done, covered in resin dust and epoxy, my hands bleeding, Simone had walked in. She was wearing a new dress fresh from a long lunch. She snapped a photo of the sculpture, sent it to the client, and received the reply, Simone, you are a true visionary, pure genius. Simone had looked at me, smiled, and said, see, I knew I could pull it off. Now, standing in the dark, surrounded by the smell of her husband's failure, she knew. The brain had no idea how to build. Her panic was a high-pitched sound in the back of her throat. She fumbled for her phone to call our father. Dad, it's a disaster. The machines are broken, Ryan. I think he ruined the Devereaux project. You have to get Kayla back. You have to make her come back. I heard the heavy thud of my father's footsteps running across the gravel driveway from the main house. He burst into the workshop, his face purple with rage. He saw the darkness. He saw the cracked acrylic block under the beam of Ryan's phone light. He didn't yell at Simone. He didn't yell at Ryan. He knew exactly who was to blame. He ripped his phone from his pocket and dialed my number. I heard it ringing from my studio apartment above the workshop. I was calm, folding a stack of sweaters and placing them in a cardboard box. I let it ring twice before answering, putting it on speaker. This childish game is over, he roared. I didn't even have to hold the phone to my ear. I don't know what kind of point you're trying to prove, Kayla, but you're finished. You get down here right now and fix this. You are ruining this family. You are destroying our legacy. I paused, placing a pair of socks into the box. I looked at my MBA still in its case on my dresser. I looked at my calloused hands. I'm sorry, Dad. I said, my voice perfectly level, calm, and clear. I can't. What do you mean you can't get down here? I can't, I repeated. I'm just following Mom's advice. She said I don't have the brain to lead. I'm just hands. And I can't possibly operate a workshop without a brain to guide me. I'm not qualified. You've got a new president now. I'm sure she can handle it. I could hear him sputtering, rendered speechless for the first time in his life. Good luck with the Devereaux Gala, I said. And please congratulate President Simone for me. I pressed the end call button, silencing his rage. I taped the box shut and wrote clothes on the side. I had 3 more boxes to pack. The silence in the workshop was absolute, broken only by Simone's panicked breathing. My father, David, was staring at the cracked $5,000 acrylic block, his face a mask of disbelief. Ryan, the investor, was uselessly trying to find a breaker box in the dark, his phone's flashlight beam cutting wildly through the gloom. You, my father finally said, his voice a low growl. He didn't look at Ryan, the man who had physically broken the machine. He looked at Simone, the brain who had no answers. You are the president. You will fix this. Call Ms. Devereaux. Now. What do I tell her? Simone's voice was a thin whine. That we broke the centerpiece, that Kayla's whole team quit. You tell her nothing, my mother Valerie interjected, stepping out of the shadows. She had been quiet until now, calculating. Her face was set in a mask of determined elegance. You will call her. You will apologize for the minor delay, and you will handle it. That's what a president does. Simone's hands were shaking so badly she could barely dial. She pressed the speakerphone button, and the sound of the line ringing filled the cold, dark workshop. We all held our breath. You've reached Ms. Devereaux. Her voice was crisp, professional. No pleasantries. Ms. Devereaux, Simone Jordan here. Simone began, her voice painfully bright. I am so terribly sorry for the delay with those photos. We've had a slight technical issue here at the workshop this morning. A technical issue, Ms. Devereaux repeated. It wasn't a question. Valerie, seeing her daughter falter, lunged for the phone. Alexis, darling, it's Valerie Jordan. I'm afraid we have a bit of a family situation. Kayla, well, you know how creative types can be. She's become a bit unstable. Unstable, Ms. Devereaux's voice was flat. Yes, terribly jealous of Simone's new leadership role. Valerie continued, her lies flowing smoothly, practiced from years of social maneuvering. She's thrown an awful tantrum, convinced her little team to walk out. She's even sabotaged some of the machines. It's a complete mess. But please don't you worry your head about it. We are handling it. We will have everything back on track for the gala. We just might need a small extension. Valerie smiled at David, confident she had handled the situation, spinning Kayla as the villain, and them as the competent leaders managing a crisis. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It wasn't a pause. It was a cold, deliberate void. I could hear my father's heavy breathing. I could hear Simone start to sniffle, preparing her tears. I pictured Ms. Devereaux, a powerful Black woman who had navigated Atlanta politics for 30 years, sitting at her desk, letting them hang themselves with their own words. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. The professional warmth was gone, replaced by something arctic, something dangerous. Valerie, she said, of the many people who have tried to lie to me in my career, you are perhaps the most insulting. Valerie's smile froze. I don't know what you mean. I am going to say this one time, Ms. Devereaux continued, her voice cutting through the speakerphone. I do not have a contract with Jordan Designs. I do not work with David. And I certainly do not work with your unqualified daughter, Simone. Now wait just a minute, David started, outraged. You will be silent, David, Ms. Devereaux commanded. I have tolerated your family's arrogance for years for one reason and one reason only. Kayla, her talent, her ingenuity, her work ethic. She is the only reason I have funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars into this family's vanity project. You didn't build this company, David. She did. You just put your name on the door. Simone let out a small, strangled sob. Ryan looked furious. My father was speechless. You call me to lie about her being unstable. Ms. Devereaux let out a short, cold laugh. You tell me she's having a jealous tantrum. You are pathetic. All of you. Now, Alexis, this is a misunderstanding. Valerie tried again, her voice pleading. No, this is a clarification. And here is the final part. You just lied to me. You said you didn't know where Kayla was, that she'd sabotaged the workshop and run off. Yes, she... Then isn't it strange, Ms. Devereaux interrupted, her voice dangerously smooth, that I know exactly where she is? Isn't it strange that she's been sitting in my office for the last 45 minutes drinking my coffee? The phone in Simone's hand clattered to the floor. She is on her way here right now, Ms. Devereaux finished, with my personal legal counsel. I suggest you find the lights, David. You're all going to need a very well-lit room for the conversation we are about to have. I was sitting in an office that was the exact opposite of the workshop, where the workshop was dark, cold, and smelled of sawdust and ozone. Ms. Devereaux's penthouse office was flooded with light. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked all of Atlanta. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfume and old books. A team of lawyers, including her personal counsel Aaliyah, was already assembled, sitting silently on a leather couch. I was shaking, still clutching the hot coffee Ms. Devereaux's assistant had given me. But how did you know? I finally managed to ask, my voice sounding small in the large room. How did you know they would lie like that? Ms. Devereaux, Alexis Devereaux, a woman who had run Atlanta's most powerful political action committee for 30 years, turned from the window. She wasn't smiling. Kayla, she said, her voice firm but not unkind. I didn't know they would lie today, but I knew they were liars. I knew they were thieves. I've been watching them for 2 years. I stared at her, confused. 2 years? But our contract for the gala was just... This isn't about the gala. This is about you. She sat in the large chair opposite me. I first noticed you at the Civic Foundation luncheon 2 years ago. Your mother Valerie was taking credit for the centerpiece designs, but I watched you. I saw you directing the setup. I saw you solving a rigging problem that had your father's professionals stumped. And I saw your mother dismiss you when you tried to speak to a donor. I saw myself at your age. I remembered that day. Valerie had told me to just handle the workers while she handled the guests. After that, I started asking questions. Ms. Devereaux continued. I have contacts everywhere, Kayla. I learned about your 10-year unpaid internship. I learned about your MBA, which your family treated like a book club. And I learned that you were the single greatest asset Jordan Designs had, and you didn't even know it. The memory hit me then, a flashback to that same luncheon. Ms. Devereaux had cornered me by the catering tables as I was checking a floral arrangement. She was intimidating, and I remember being terrified. Your work is exceptional, she had said, ignoring my stammered thanks. Your mother is a fool. She's so busy polishing her golden child that she doesn't see the diamond she's using as a doorstop. I've seen it a dozen times, Kayla. Brilliant, capable black women held back not by strangers, but by the jealousy of their own family. Don't you ever let them dim your light for their comfort. I had thought it was just a strange, intense pep talk from a powerful woman. I never realized it was the beginning of a plan. You've been mentoring me, I whispered. I've been protecting you, she corrected. I couldn't interfere directly. That would have made their resentment worse. So I did it through business. I insisted my contracts for the gala and 3 other events be routed through you. I made them see you as a point of contact even if they didn't like it. I wanted you to have a paper trail of your own authority. I wanted you to have connections that were separate from them. And I was waiting for this day. The day they would finally overplay their hand. They think they're coming here to apologize to me, Ms. Devereaux said, to smooth things over to save the gala contract. They think I'm just an angry client. But they're right, aren't they? I asked. The contract is with Jordan Designs. They can just, I don't know, hire someone else. We're ruined. Ms. Devereaux's lawyer Aaliyah spoke for the first time. No, Ms. Jordan. They are not right. They can't hire someone else. Because they don't own the designs. I looked at her confused. What do you mean? Ms. Devereaux leaned forward. Your family thinks in old, outdated terms, Kayla. They think legacy is a building a family name. They don't understand that in the 21st century, intellectual property is the legacy. They see you as hands. They see Simone as the brain. They've made a fatal and frankly stupid mistake. She gestured to Aaliyah. 6 months ago, when we finalized the gala contract, I insisted on a special addendum. Do you remember? The one I told you was just a standard artist protection clause? I nodded slowly, trying to recall. It had been a thick packet of legal documents. I had been so focused on the fabrication specs. That clause, Aaliyah said, her voice sharp and precise, which your father signed without reading because he was in such a hurry to secure Ms. Devereaux's money, was an intellectual property licensing agreement. It states that all original design concepts, digital renderings, and fabrication blueprints created by Kayla Jordan in her capacity as lead creative remain her sole intellectual property. It specifies, Ms. Devereaux added, that Jordan Designs is merely the licensed fabricator, and that license is contingent on your continued willing involvement in the project. The moment you stopped working for them, the license to build your designs was revoked. The air left my lungs. The gala, the centerpieces, the entire stage concept, that's all mine. Legally and indisputably, Aaliyah confirmed. If they try to build them without you, they are in breach of contract and committing intellectual property theft, a theft we could sue them for into oblivion. Ms. Devereaux's intercom buzzed. Her assistant's voice filled the room. Ms. Devereaux, David Valerie, and Simone Jordan are in the lobby. They are insistent. Ms. Devereaux looked at me, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. They're still trying to use their brain, Kayla. It's time to show them what your hands have truly built. She picked up her own phone and dialed her assistant. Cynthia, please inform my driver we are leaving, and call the lobby at Jordan Designs. Tell them their new president should prepare the conference room. Ms. Jordan and I are on our way. The Jordan Designs conference room was my father's sanctuary. It was dominated by a heavy mahogany table, and the walls were covered with framed photos of his achievements. My father, David, sat at the head of the table, attempting to look commanding, but his knuckles were white as he gripped the chair arms. My mother, Valerie, sat beside him, forcing a tight, diplomatic smile. Simone, the new president, looked pale, her eyes red from crying, while her husband, Ryan, tapped his pen on the table, radiating impatience. They were waiting. They had been waiting for an hour. When the door finally opened, it wasn't just Ms. Devereaux. She entered flanked by 2 people, me holding a simple leather portfolio, and Aaliyah, her personal attorney, a woman whose reputation in Atlanta was legendary. Aaliyah didn't just carry a briefcase. She carried an aura of absolute terrifying competence. Alexis. My father began trying to take charge, his voice falsely hearty. I'm glad you're finally here. We can sort this out. Obviously, we apologize for the, setback. Kayla has been unwell. We are prepared to offer you a significant discount on the gala contract to make up for her lapse in judgment. My mother, Valerie, chimed in, her voice dripping with false concern. We are just so worried about her. This instability. We are handling it. Simone is perfectly capable of taking over. We just need to move past this unpleasantness. Ryan leaned forward, his smile all teeth. Look, let's cut the crap. Kayla had a meltdown. We fired her. She's not part of the company, so whatever contract you thought you had with her, it's void. Now the company is ready to fulfill the Devereaux contract. What's it going to take to make you happy? 10% off. Ms. Devereaux didn't respond. She didn't even look at them. She simply nodded to her lawyer. Aaliyah placed her leather briefcase on the mahogany table. The click of the latches was the only sound in the room. Mr. Jordan, Aaliyah said, her voice smooth and clear, I believe you are operating under a severe misapprehension. She slid a document across the table. This is the addendum to the Devereaux Gala contract, the one you signed 6 months ago. You'll recall Ms. Devereaux insisted on an artist protection clause before releasing the first deposit. David glanced at it, frowning. I remember. Standard boilerplate, legal nonsense. Not quite, Aaliyah said. Please turn to page 4, section 2B. This is a personal creative consultancy agreement. It specifies that all original design concepts, digital renderings, and fabrication blueprints created by Ms. Kayla Jordan remain her sole intellectual property. Valerie clutched David's arm. Simone had stopped breathing. Aaliyah continued. It further states that Jordan Designs is merely the fabricator licensed to use these designs only for this event, and that Ms. Kayla Jordan is to be paid a 20% personal royalty on the total contract value for her creative labor. David and Valerie looked stunned, but Ryan actually laughed. He threw his head back and chuckled. You've got to be kidding me. That's absurd. She's an employee. It's called work for hire. Whatever she made on company time, the company owns. This document isn't worth the paper it's printed on. We'll fight this in court. Aaliyah's smile was the most dangerous thing in that room. Fight it, please. You seem to be confused, Mr. Ryan. Work for hire applies to employees. She looked at David. Mr. Jordan, could you please provide me with Kayla's employment contract, her W-2 forms? Any pay stubs or direct deposit records from the last 10 years. David stared at her, the color draining from his face. Aaliyah continued. That's right. You don't have any, because you never paid her. You don't have an employment contract. You don't have a single document proving she was ever your employee. In the eyes of the law, Ms. Kayla Jordan has been an independent contractor systematically exploited by your family for a decade. Aaliyah leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. You didn't just breach a contract. You stole her work, and your new president. Aaliyah nodded toward Simone. She just presented 5 of Kayla's copyrighted designs as her own at the pre-gala meeting last week. That's fraud. And that is where we begin. Simone, seeing the legal trap closing, tried to pivot to use the one weapon she had left, her charm. She stood up, her voice trembling artfully, and turned to Ms. Devereaux. Alexis, please. This is all just legal paperwork. It's technicalities. It's not what Jordan Designs is about. We are a creative company. We build dreams. What I have always brought is the vision, the concept. That's what our clients pay for. She turned to our father David, her eyes wide and pleading. Daddy, tell them. Tell them about the portfolio I presented. Tell them about the new direction. Vision, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade. Simone stopped, startled. I had been silent for too long, and now I was finally speaking. Let's talk about your vision, Simone. Let's talk about that degree from Parsons you're so proud of. Valerie, my mother, saw an opening. Exactly. My daughter graduated from Parsons. She is a world-class designer. She is... I agreed, my eyes locked on my sister. I know you went to Parsons. I know you told Mom and Dad you graduated with a degree in event design and fabrication. Simone nodded, preening slightly, sensing an ally. I did, with honors. That's a lie, I said. I called the registrar's office last week. After I got my MBA, I decided to check on your credentials. You didn't graduate with a degree in event design. You graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Art History. The room went completely still. David looked at Simone, his face a mask of confusion. Simone? What is she talking about? She's lying. Simone shrieked, her composure shattering. She's jealous. She's always been jealous of my talent. Art history is a fine degree. I continued, my voice calm and methodical like a surgeon making an incision. You can talk about Renaissance art for hours, but you know what it doesn't teach you. It doesn't teach you AutoCAD. It doesn't teach you Rhino 3D. It doesn't teach you how to program the CNC router, or how to calibrate the 3D laser cutter, or how to run a structural integrity test on a 30-foot hanging installation. I turned to my father. All the things I do. The things the hands do. I walked over to the conference room's display wall, where Simone's presidential portfolio was still elegantly displayed from their last client meeting. I tapped the first design, a complex suspended floral chandelier. Which makes this portfolio very interesting, I said. Because I recognized all of it. This design, this was my capstone project for my undergraduate architecture degree, the one Mom and Dad called a nice hobby and refused to attend the show for. I moved to the next image, a 3D render of a futuristic stage. This one I designed 3 years ago for the Tech Atlanta conference, and this one, I pointed to the gala centerpiece design, I finished that 2 weeks ago. The memory was so clear it felt like it was happening right now. I was in the workshop at 3 in the morning, my eyes burning from staring at the screen, finally finishing the complex 3D render. Simone had walked in yawning, holding a cup of tea, her phone in her hand. "Wow, Kayla, that's almost good," she'd said. She snapped a photo, looked at it, and tilted her head. "I had a great idea. It needs more gold." The next day I heard her in Dad's office, her voice bright. "Daddy, I had a stroke of genius last night. I've designed the most incredible centerpiece for Ms. Devereaux." I looked back at my sister. Her face was ashen. "You didn't just sketch these, Simone. You stole them. You stole my work, my portfolio, and you presented it as your own to get a job you aren't qualified for. You are not a brain, Simone. You're a fraud." Simone didn't just cry. She imploded. A sound came out of her, a raw, choking sob, and she crumpled into her chair, her hands covering her face, her shoulders heaving. She was completely broken. Valerie and David stared at her, their mouths open. The genius, the vision, the golden child. It was all a lie, all of it. They had bet their entire legacy on a fraud, and they had just been publicly, totally exposed. Ryan, her husband, looked at his weeping wife with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. He wasn't looking at a partner. He was looking at a bad investment. The silence stretched, filled only by Simone's pathetic sobs. Then Ryan leaned back in his chair and started to clap a slow, single, mocking clap. "Well," he said, his voice dripping with newfound respect as he looked at me, "I'll be damned, the quiet one. So you're not just hands after all. You're a shark. I can respect that." He stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. "But you missed one thing, Kayla. A very, very big thing." Ryan, seeing his wife, his golden child asset, dissolve into a sobbing, incoherent mess, felt no sympathy. He felt anger. His entire position in this family was built on Simone's perceived value. If she was a fraud, his leverage was gone. He stood up abruptly, slamming his manicured hands on the mahogany table. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice cracking with rage. "I have sat here and listened to this coup. You think you're clever, don't you, Kayla? You and your little political friend. You're destroying this company as an investor in Jordan Designs. I am telling you." "You're not an investor," I interrupted. My voice was suddenly so cold, so sharp, it silenced him mid-rant. He turned to me, his eyes narrowing. "What did you just say?" I said. I repeated, standing up to meet his gaze. "You're not an investor. You're a fraud." My father, David, looked up, his face ashen. "Kayla, what are you talking about now? Ryan has been advising us for a year. He's been robbing you," I said, my eyes never leaving Ryan's. "Isn't that right, Ryan? Let's talk about the $500,000 you convinced Dad to pull from the operating budget last quarter." Valerie looked confused. That was for the tech partnership. Ryan said it was a guaranteed return. Oh, it was a guaranteed return, I said. Just not for Jordan Designs. Ryan tried to recover, putting on his slick investor smile. Kayla, you're clearly emotional. You're out of your depth. That was a high-yield venture capital play. It's confidential. It has a 3-year maturity. It's none of your concern. It became my concern, I said, when I was working 80-hour weeks for free watching the company's cash flow bleed out, and my father told me we couldn't afford to hire a new carpenter. It became my concern when I earned my Master of Business Administration and decided to finally use my brain to figure out where all the money I was making was disappearing. I unlocked my phone and slid it onto the table, an Excel spreadsheet glowing on the screen. I've been auditing the books for the last 6 months. In my spare time, of course, between running your entire production line and finishing my thesis. I pointed to a line item. There it is. A wire transfer for $500,000 authorized by David Jordan to a holding company called RSVP Capital Partners. I thought that was a strange name. So I looked it up. It's a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. And do you know what RSVP stands for, Ryan? Ryan's face had gone from red to a sickly pale white. He was frozen. It stands for Ryan and Simone's Venture Portfolio, I said clearly. But it's not a portfolio. It's a personal offshore account. The money never went to a tech partnership. It went straight into your pocket. You stole $500,000 from the father-in-law who worshipped you and the wife who was your cover story. David let out a sound, a low, wounded animal groan. He stared at Ryan, the betrayal absolute. Ryan, is this true? Valerie looked at the phone, then at Ryan, then at Simone, who was still sobbing, oblivious to this new layer of destruction. Ryan, you didn't. He did, I said. He's been bleeding this company dry while you've been busy calling me the problem. You were so focused on the brain of the operation that you never noticed the parasite attached to it. Ryan was completely silent. He, the slick, fast-talking venture capitalist, the white shoe investor who thought he was leagues above this family business, had just been completely and publicly gutted by the quiet girl in the graduation gown. He didn't just underestimate me, he had failed to see me at all. And in his arrogance, he'd left a trail. But you said, David stammered, looking at me, his world collapsing. How did you paid for my MBA, Dad, I said, my voice hardening. You just never thought I'd actually use it on you. You dare! My father's voice was not just a shout. It was a roar that seemed to shake the mahogany table. He slammed his fist down, rattling the crystal water glasses, his face a dark shade of crimson. You dare go digging through my private books, my company. Who do you think you are? All the polished composure of the Buckhead CEO was gone, replaced by the raw fury of a king whose authority had just been publicly overthrown. Ryan, my brother-in-law, looked relieved, clearly thinking my father's anger was his shield. He was wrong. I didn't flinch. I stood there, my MBA diploma still sitting on the edge of the table, a silent witness. I'm the one who had to, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I had to know why the company I worked 80-hour weeks for free was suddenly bleeding cash. I had to know why we couldn't afford to hire a new carpenter, why our vendor payments were suddenly 60 days late. I let my gaze drift from my father to Ryan, who had stopped smirking. I assumed it was just bad management, Ryan. I assumed you were making stupid high-risk investments. But then I found the wire transfer, the one for $500,000. The one you both pushed through. I looked back at my father, and I realized it wasn't the company's money at all, was it, Dad? My father's eyes flickered a fraction of a second, glance toward my mother, Valerie. It was all the confirmation I needed. Valerie, who had been frozen, clutched the pearls at her neck. Kayla, this is a private family matter. This is not for— You used my name, I said, cutting her off. The words dropped into the room like a bomb. David stopped breathing. Valerie's hand froze on her pearls. Ryan's pale face went a shade whiter. What What did you say? David whispered, his rage instantly extinguished, replaced by a dawning terrible fear. The loan, I said, my voice rising, the betrayal of 10 years fueling every word. The $500,000 wasn't an investment from the company, Ryan. It was a loan, a business loan from Atlanta First National. A loan you told Dad the company couldn't qualify for because its credit was stretched too thin. So you needed a co-signer. I continued, walking slowly toward the head of the table. A guarantor. Someone with perfect credit, a stable decade-long work history, and a future of high earning potential. You needed me. I stared at my mother. You brought me the papers, Mom. You brought them to my studio at midnight 2 weeks ago. You said it was a standard administrative review of the family's assets. You told me to just sign here and here so we could update the corporate insurance. I didn't know what it was, Valerie stammered, looking at David for help, but he was staring into space, his face gray. You knew, I shot back. You knew it was a loan application, and you brought it to me during my MBA finals week. You knew I'd be exhausted. You knew I'd be distracted. You knew I would trust my own mother. But the bank needed a final step, I said, pulling one last document from my portfolio. A digital signature to authorize the final wire transfer. And I was in my macroeconomics final. I wasn't answering my phone, so you did it for me. I held up the paper. It was the digital authorization time-stamped. You forged my digital signature, I said, the accusation landing with the weight of a gavel. You, my mother, and my father. You committed wire fraud. You used your daughter's identity to steal $500,000, all to fund your son-in-law's offshore bank account. Ryan made a move halfway out of his chair, but Aaliyah, Ms. Devereaux's lawyer, simply raised an eyebrow. He froze, a man trapped. Simone was no longer sobbing. She was staring at her husband, her brain finally processing the depth of his betrayal. David Jordan, the patriarch, the legacy builder, the king of Atlanta event design, slumped in his chair. He looked small, defeated, ruined. Valerie was silent, her mask of polite society shattered, leaving only the raw, ugly truth of her ambition. I looked over at Ms. Devereaux. She hadn't said a word. She didn't need to. She slowly picked up her coffee cup, took a delicate sip, and then looked at Aaliyah. They shared a small, satisfied nod. They hadn't just won the battle over the gala contract. They had won the entire war. The brain was a fraud. The investor was a thief. And the parents were criminals. The hands were now holding all the cards. I stood up. The sudden scrape of my chair on the hardwood floor was the only sound in the suffocating silence. Ryan was frozen, his face a sickly pale gray. Simone was still sobbing, but they were the quiet, hiccuping sobs of the truly defeated. My father, David, looked like a man who had been hollowed out, his eyes vacant, staring at the polished mahogany of the table. My mother, Valerie, was staring at the digital authorization on my phone screen, her hand still frozen at her neck, her pearls digging into her skin. I walked slowly to the head of the table, to the spot that had always been my father's. I placed my hands flat on the wood, feeling the grain beneath my palms. These hands he so easily dismissed. So, I said, and my voice was calm. It was clear. It was the voice of the new owner. As I see it, you have two options. I looked at Ryan, who flinched. I looked at Simone, who wouldn't look at me. I looked at my parents. Option 1. I walk out of this room. Aaliyah. I nodded to my lawyer. Will immediately contact the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Georgia. She will present them with a file detailing wire fraud in the amount of $500,000 authorized by David Jordan, facilitated by Valerie Jordan, using my forged digital signature. Aaliyah, who had been silent, spoke up, her voice like ice. To be clear, Mr. and Mrs. Jordan, that is a federal offense. Title 18 U.S. Code. Given the amount and the clear evidence of conspiracy and forgery, you are not looking at probation. You are looking at significant prison time. My mother let out a small, strangled noise like an animal caught in a trap. I continued turning my gaze to Ryan. Aaliyah will also file a report with the Atlanta Police Department's white-collar crime unit regarding your embezzlement. That's a separate state-level charge. I believe theft by conversion is the lovely local term. I'm sure your other investors would be fascinated to learn about your Cayman accounts. Ms. Devereaux, who had been watching this all with the mild interest of someone watching a play, finally spoke. And I, she said, her voice cutting through the room, will personally file a multi-million-dollar civil suit for copyright infringement, breach of contract, and fraud. I will not just sue the company, I will sue each of you personally. I will strip this company of every last asset. I will seize your homes. I will make it my personal mission to ensure that the Jordan name is synonymous with thief in this city for the next 50 years. I looked back at my parents. The Jordan legacy will be a cautionary tale. Your photos will be in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, but not in the society section. You will lose the house, you will lose the company, you will lose your reputation, and you, I looked straight at David, will likely go to prison. My mother Valerie finally broke. She let out a desperate wailing sound. No, no, David, do something. You can't let this happen. My life, our friends, everything. My father didn't respond. He was clutching his chest, his breathing shallow. He looked old and small. The king was finally dethroned, not by a business rival, but by the daughter he had dismissed as just hands. Or, I said, my voice cutting cleanly through my mother's hysterics. There is option 2. Aaliyah stepped forward. She placed a thick leather-bound document in the center of the table. She slid it with a heavy final sound directly in front of my father. He looked down at it, his hands shaking. What? What is this? I looked at all of them. The brain Simone, a weeping fraud. The investor Ryan, a silent cornered thief. The matriarch Valerie, a hysterical criminal. And the patriarch David, a broken old man. That, I said, is a stock transfer agreement. You are transferring 51% of Jordan Designs to me, not as an inheritance, not as a gift, as payment. For 10 years of unpaid labor, for the theft of my intellectual property, and for the fraudulent use of my name. I paused, letting the weight of the offer settle. You sign that document, all of you. And the lawsuits, the FBI, the criminal charges, they stop. You get to save your precious legacy from public ruin, but it will no longer be yours. I smiled a smile that didn't reach my eyes. It will be mine. Ryan's face, a mask of privileged white shoe confidence, finally cracked. He shot out of his chair, his expensive Italian loafer scraping loudly against the floor. The sound was violent in the silence. "Don't you dare sign that!" he screamed. He wasn't yelling at me. He was yelling at David, his father-in-law. "David, are you insane? Don't you see what she's doing? This is extortion. It's illegal. This is a shakedown, and you're just going to bend over and take it." He turned his full venomous rage on me. "You think you're so smart, you little bitch? You think you can just walk in here with your political hack friend and steal this company? We will fight this. I will bury you in litigation. You'll be begging us for a job when I'm through with you." Aaliyah, Ms. Devereaux's lawyer, didn't even stand up. She looked at Ryan with the bored expression of a zookeeper watching a monkey throw things. "You will do nothing," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through his tirade like a diamond. Ryan stopped, his mouth half open. "Mr. Ryan," Aaliyah said, as if explaining a complex concept to a small child, "let me be very clear so that even you can understand. Extortion is the act of obtaining something through force or threats without a legal claim. Blackmail is demanding payment in return for not revealing compromising information." She tapped one manicured finger on the thick, leather-bound document in the center of the table. "This is neither. This is a civil settlement agreement to avoid criminal prosecution. Your father-in-law and mother-in-law," she nodded at David and Valerie, "committed federal wire fraud. That's a felony, Mr. Ryan. It carries a penalty of up to 20 years in prison." My mother Valerie let out a small, strangled gasp. Aaliyah wasn't finished. She continued, her gaze landing on Ryan. Committed embezzlement and bank fraud. Also felonies. Your wife? She glanced at the sobbing, broken Simone. Committed intellectual property fraud and conspiracy. What Ms. Kayla Jordan is offering you is not a threat. It is a lifeline. It is frankly the most generous deal I have ever witnessed in my 30-year career. She is offering to save you. And you are too stupid to see it. Valerie's head snapped up. Her crying had stopped. She stared at Aaliyah, then at David, then back at me. The word generous was not what she expected, but the words federal wire fraud and prison time had hit their mark. I watched my mother's brain work, the one she was so proud of. I saw her calculating not morality, but survival. I saw her eyes flicker around the room. She saw the framed photographs on the wall. David with the governor. Valerie cutting the ribbon at the High Museum of Art. Their entire identity, their reputation in Buckhead, their legacy. All of it was built on the image of success and power. A criminal trial, prison sentences. It wouldn't just be a scandal. It would be an annihilation. Their name would be mud. The Jordan legacy would be a joke, a whisper at every gala and country club in Atlanta. She looked at David. My father was staring at the stock transfer agreement. He was staring at the line that said 51%. This company was his life. It was his identity. It was the only thing he had ever truly loved. To sign it away, to me, the daughter he had dismissed as just hands, it was a fate worse than death. But public humiliation was worse. Prison was worse. Valerie's hand, covered in diamonds, reached out. It trembled as she placed it on David's arm. David, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Sign it. He didn't move. He just stared at the paper. My company, he stammered. It's just paper, David, she hissed, her voice cracking. Our reputation, our name, we can't. Just sign the paper. We'll fix this later. Even then she was scheming. But I knew, and she would soon learn, there was no fixing this. David looked at Ryan with an expression of pure, unadulterated hatred. This was his fault. This slick con artist had brought this ruin upon his house. Then he looked at me. There was no hatred in his eyes. There was no anger. There was just nothing. Emptiness. He picked up the heavy gold-plated pen from his desk set. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He fumbled with the cap. Bring me the papers, he whispered to Aaliyah. Aaliyah slid the document to him. He opened to the last page. He stared at the signature line. David Jordan, founder and CEO. He uncapped the pen. I watched the nib hover over the line for 1, 2, 3 long seconds. Then, with a ragged sigh that sounded like the life leaving his body, he signed. He signed away his kingdom. Mrs. Jordan, Aaliyah said softly. Valerie, weeping silently now, took the pen and signed. Miss Simone Jordan. Aaliyah nodded to my sister. Simone, her face a streaked, mascara-stained mess, her designer dress wrinkled, signed her name like a child writing a confession. Aaliyah took the documents, reviewed the signatures, and placed them securely in her briefcase. She snapped the latches shut. It was done. David slumped in his chair, a hollowed-out shell. Valerie was crying into a napkin. Ryan was staring at the wall, his mind clearly racing, trying to find an angle, a way out. I stood up. I walked to the end of the table and picked up my MBA diploma. I straightened my graduation gown. Thank you, I said to Aaliyah and Ms. Devereaux. Then, I turned to my family. Thank you for your cooperation, I said, my voice as crisp and professional as Ms. Devereaux's. This concludes our negotiation. I'll have Aaliyah's team coordinate with yours, Ryan, for the repayment of the $500,000. I started to walk out. I was at the door when I stopped. Oh, I said, turning back. They all looked up, startled like frightened animals. I almost forgot. The first meeting of the new board of directors will be in 5 minutes. Here, in this room. Please stay. I walked to the head of the table, to the large leather chair that had been my father's throne for 30 years. I didn't sit immediately. I stood there for a moment, letting them all absorb the new reality. My father David was slumped in the chair to my right, staring blankly at the signed documents. My mother Valerie was sniffing into a silk handkerchief, her eyes darting between me and Ms. Devereaux, who had taken a seat by the wall, a silent, powerful witness. Ryan was clenching and unclenching his fists under the table. And Simone was just a ghost, her face buried in her hands, her sobs the only sound. "This meeting of the Board of Directors of Jordan Designs is now in session," I said. My voice was clear and steady. It echoed slightly in the grand, silent room. Valerie's head snapped up. "What board? What are you?" "The new board," I said, finally sitting down in my father's chair. It was comfortable. "As the new majority shareholder, I am exercising my right to restructure. And as the new chairwoman, I am setting the agenda." Ryan sneered his arrogance, making a final, desperate appearance. "This is a joke. You don't know the first thing about running a board meeting. You're a carpenter." "I am a carpenter," I agreed, looking him dead in the eye. "I'm also a Master of Business Administration from Emory University, and I am the legal owner of 51% of this company. So you will be quiet, or I will have security remove you." Aaliyah, my lawyer, made a small note on her pad. Ryan's mouth snapped shut. "Agenda item 1," I continued. "Corporate restructuring and termination of non-essential and fraudulent personnel." I turned my gaze to my sister. She didn't look up. "Simone Jordan, you are terminated effective immediately. Cause gross misrepresentation of credentials and academic fraud." Simone let out a choked sound, but didn't move. "Ryan," I said, turning to my brother-in-law, "your consultancy contract with Jordan Designs is terminated. Cause embezzlement of $500,000 in company funds. I trust you'll be hearing from Aaliyah's team regarding a very structured repayment plan, unless of course you'd prefer we file the criminal report." Ryan went pale but said nothing. He was, for the first time in his life, trapped. "Mom," I said. Valerie looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and entitlement. "You are hereby removed from the board of directors. Your position as Director of Public Relations is also terminated, as your recent actions have proven you are a liability to the company's reputation." You're firing me," she whispered, as if the concept was foreign. "From my own—" "David, say something." My father didn't move. "I am," I said. "However, out of respect for your position, I am offering you a choice. You can either take early retirement effective immediately, or you can accept a new position. We have an opening for a receptionist. You'll answer the phones and greet clients. It pays $45,000 a year plus benefits. It's your choice." The humiliation was a visible thing washing over her face. To go from Buckhead matriarch to a receptionist answering phones in the company she thought she owned. It was a fate worse than being fired. "Finally," I said, turning to my father. "Dad?" He finally looked up. His eyes were defeated. "You can stay," I said. "You're a good founder and you know the history, but you are no longer CEO, you are no longer on the board, you are being reassigned. The workshop needs a new foreman now that Miguel is my new chief of operations. You will report to him. You'll be back on the tools where you started." This, I knew, was the deepest cut. Miguel was the master craftsman, a man my father had always treated as the help. To report to him, to be hands just like me, was the ultimate demotion. I looked at the four of them. The brains had been fired. The investor was a debtor. The matriarch was a receptionist. And the patriarch was back on the factory floor. "That concludes agenda item 1, I said. "Are there any questions?" Valerie finally found her voice. It was not a whisper. It was a shriek. "You can't do this. This is my house. This is my family, you ungrateful. After everything we did for you, we took you in." She was standing now, her face twisted in a mask of pure rage, all social grace gone. "This is our legacy. You think you can just walk in here and take this? I interrupted, my voice perfectly calm, cutting through her hysteria. Is not your house. This is a corporate conference room. This is not your family. This is a company, my company. I stood up, gathering my papers, and nodded to Ms. Devereaux and Aaliyah. And I am not running it on feelings, Mom. I'm running it on the numbers. And you, all of you, are a liability. 6 months. That's how long it took to erase the last traces of the old Jordan designs and build something new, something mine. I stood on the newly installed steel catwalk overlooking the workshop floor, a mug of coffee warming my hands. The sign by the main entrance, the one my father had hung 30 years ago, was gone. In its place, a massive laser-cut steel sign read, Kayla Jordan Creative. The workshop was loud. It was bright. It was alive. The silence of that Monday morning was a distant memory. The hum of the CNC router, the hiss of the welding torch, and the rhythmic beat of hammers on steel was the music of productivity. The air smelled of fresh-cut cedar hot metal and opportunity. I had called Miguel and Aisha first the day after I took control. They had been working for scraps at a custom cabinet shop, miserable. I didn't just offer them their jobs back. I offered them partnership. I can't pay you what you're worth today, I had told them sitting in my empty studio apartment, but I'm giving you both 5% equity. When this company succeeds, you succeed. Their loyalty, built over a decade of shared work and mutual respect, was the foundation of my new company. They came back and they brought the rest of my old team with them. Now looking down, I saw a dozen artisans working, laughing, creating. My eyes found him in the back near the joinery station. My father, David. He looked smaller without his custom-tailored suits. He was wearing a simple canvas apron, the same kind I used to wear. He was patiently guiding a young apprentice, a 19-year-old woman from the local technical college, showing her how to finish a complex miter joint. He looked tired, yes, but he also looked peaceful. It was a look I had never seen on his face when he was a CEO, when he was obsessed with legacy and status. He wasn't a king anymore. He was a craftsman. He had returned to the work his hands actually knew how to do. He must have felt me watching because he looked up. Our eyes met across the noisy workshop. He didn't smile, but he nodded. A single sharp nod of respect. And I nodded back. Our new relationship wasn't built on apologies or forced family dinners. It was built on sawdust skill and a silent mutual understanding. It was better. The real friction, the real unresolved tension, was at the front of the building. I walked through the new glass-walled hallway that led to the corporate offices. My mother Valerie sat at the minimalist reception desk I had designed. It was made of raw steel and reclaimed oak. Everything she hated. She looked hollowed out. Her perfectly manicured nails, once used for gesturing at galas, now clicked anxiously on a keyboard. Her designer suits had been replaced by a simple professional and entirely bland beige blouse, the new company uniform for administrative staff. She was the picture of misery, trapped in a role she despised, but too proud to quit, and too terrified of my father's silent disappointment to complain. She saw me approaching and immediately put on the strained, bright smile that had once defined Atlanta high society. "Kayla, darling," she said, her voice too loud in the quiet, polished concrete lobby. "I was just looking at the photos from the mayor's gala last week. It was spectacular." I stopped, my hand on the door to my new office. "Thank you, Mom. The team worked very hard." "Oh, yes, of course," she said, rushing her words. "Everyone, absolutely everyone, was talking about the centerpieces. Senator Thompson's wife said she had never seen anything like it. She said your company is the only one in Atlanta doing work at that level." She was fishing, desperately, trying to find her way back in, trying to reclaim her role as the matriarch, the PR voice, the one who took credit. She was trying to align herself with my success. I didn't give it to her. I didn't say, "Thank you, Mom." I didn't say, "We did it." I just looked at her. "I'm glad the client was happy," I said. "That's what matters." The polite professional wall I put up was more painful to her than any insult I could have hurled. I was treating her like an employee. But, she tried again, a note of desperation in her voice. I was just thinking. For the symphony fundraiser next month, perhaps we could reintroduce the gold leaf elements we used to use. My office phone rooted through my cell rang. The sound cut her off mid-sentence. I pulled it from my pocket and glanced at the screen. "Excuse me, Mom," I said, my voice polite, professional, and utterly cold. I turned toward my office door. "I have to take this." "But Kayla, could you please make sure my 10 o'clock appointment is comfortable when they arrive?" "They're from the High Museum." I didn't wait for an answer. "And please hold all my other calls. Ms. Devereaux is being patched in on this one." I watched her face crumble. The polite dismissal, the casual mention of a client she would have killed to have lunch with, the reminder that she was staff, that her role was to take messages, not to give creative direction. It was a perfectly executed, bloodless maneuver. She shrank back into the receptionist's chair. The sleek, modern headset suddenly looked heavy and humiliating on her perfectly coiffed hair. She nodded, her throat working. "Yes, of course. Kayla." She turned back to the switchboard, defeated. I walked into my office and closed the door, leaving her alone in the big, bright lobby I had built. The fallout was immediate, and it was total. Ryan, it turned out, hadn't just stolen from my father. He had been running a complex shell game using the Jordan Designs name and my father's reputation to leverage investments from half of Buckhead. The $500,000 he took from us was just a drop in the bucket. When Aaliyah filed the initial fraud report, it triggered an avalanche. His other partners, his other investors, the ones he'd met at the country club and promised guaranteed returns, all started their own audits. His entire house of cards collapsed in less than a week. We heard he was being sued by 3 different firms. The SEC had frozen his assets. He was facing federal charges. His name, once a symbol of slick new money success, was now toxic. And just like that, he was gone. He didn't even pack a bag. He simply transferred the last remaining funds from his joint account with Simone and disappeared. His phone disconnected, his social media erased. He left her. He left her with the creditors, the lawyers, and the humiliation. He left her with nothing. Simone's fall was quieter, but in many ways more profound. After the confrontation in the conference room, she had locked herself in her pristine designer bedroom for a week, refusing to see or speak to anyone. My mother, Valerie, in her new role as our receptionist, would come to work with red, swollen eyes, whispering to my father in the workshop about how Simone just wouldn't eat, how she just stared at the wall. They expected me to feel guilty. They expected me to fix it. I just kept working. When Simone finally emerged, she was a different person. The polished, effortless charm was gone, replaced by a brittle, sharp-edged desperation. With Ryan gone and his accounts frozen, she had no money. For the first time in her 28 years of life, Simone Jordan was poor. She did the only thing she knew how to do. She tried to leverage her name and her Parsons degree. She put on her best suit and went to our biggest competitor, Atlanta Premier Events, asking for a job as a creative director. I heard about the interview later from their CEO, who had become a friendly acquaintance. He said she walked in with all her old arrogance, presenting a portfolio of my work. She had actually tried to pass off my designs as her own again. The CEO, a man who had known my father for 20 years, just looked at her. "Simone," he said, "I know you're David's daughter. And I also know you're the woman who just lost her family's company because you lied about your degree from Parsons. The art history degree." The news had spread through our tight-knit community like wildfire. The story was too good. The brain who had no skills. The hands who had an MBA. Simone was not just unemployed, she was unemployable. She was a punchline. The last I saw of her was 3 months later. I was at Lenox Square meeting an architect for lunch at Neiman Marcus. As I walked through the designer handbag department, I saw her. She was wearing a black polyester uniform, folding sweaters. A customer, a woman who looked exactly like our mother, was complaining loudly. "This is pilling already. The quality in this store has gone to hell." Simone just stood there, her face a mask of bitter resentment, and said, "Yes, ma'am. I'm very sorry, ma'am. Let me find another one for you." She looked up, and her eyes met mine across the sales floor. I was in a custom-tailored suit holding a leather briefcase on my way to a high-level meeting. She was folding cashmere. The hatred in her gaze was so pure, so toxic, it was almost stunning. Then she saw the magazine rack near the checkout. It was the new issue of Atlanta Business Chronicle, and there I was on the cover. The photo was taken in my workshop, me and my element sparks flying from a welder in the background. The headline was simple: "The Hands That Rebuilt an Empire, Kayla Jordan's Creative Revolution." I watched my sister, the golden child, the brain, look at my face on that cover. Her lip curled, and with a small, vicious movement, she turned the magazine around so the cover was facing the back. I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked to my lunch. That night, an email appeared in my inbox from a strange, anonymous account. The subject line was empty. The body of the email had only 2 sentences. "You didn't just take the company, you took my life. I hope you're happy." I read it. I felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, nothing at all. I just pressed delete and went back to reviewing the blueprints for the new Devereaux contract. The ballroom at the Intercontinental Buckhead was a sea of glittering gowns and black ties. It felt like the entire business community of Atlanta was crammed into one room, the air electric with anticipation and the scent of expensive perfume. I stood near the back, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. This was the Atlanta Business Chronicle's Entrepreneur of the Year Gala, the biggest event of the year. My company, Kayla Jordan Creative, was nominated for the Rising Star Award. I was nominated for Entrepreneur of the Year. I felt sick. I saw Ms. Devereaux at a front table looking regal in a deep purple gown. She caught my eye and gave me a single, imperceptible nod. A jolt of courage went through me. Beside her sat Miguel, my new chief of operations, and Aisha, my head of fabrication. And next to them, looking profoundly uncomfortable in a rented tuxedo, was my father. He hadn't said much all night. Since that day in the conference room 6 months ago, our relationship had been quiet. He worked. He reported to Miguel. He did his job with a grim, focused efficiency. He hadn't apologized, and I hadn't asked him to. His presence here tonight at my table was the closest we had come to reconciliation. A local news anchor was at the podium. "This next category," she said, her voice bright, "is perhaps our most exciting. It honors a leader who has shown not just innovation and explosive growth, but true resilience in the face of adversity." I barely heard her. I was just trying to breathe. I felt a hand squeeze my arm. It was my father. His hand was rough, callous, just like mine. I looked at him surprised. He was staring straight ahead at the stage, but his jaw was set. He was nervous for me. "The nominees represent the very best of our city," the anchor continued. "But the committee's decision this year was unanimous. This entrepreneur didn't just build a new company, they rebuilt a legacy, transforming it from the inside out. The 2025 Atlanta Entrepreneur of the Year is Kayla Jordan." The room exploded in applause. A spotlight found me, blinding me. I couldn't move. I just stared. Miguel was patting my back. Aisha was cheering. Ms. Devereaux was on her feet, leading the standing ovation. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder, a brief, shaky squeeze. "Go on," he whispered. "Go get it." The walk to the stage felt like it was happening in slow motion, my heels sinking into the thick carpet. I passed the table where my mother Valerie was seated. She was a guest of a guest, not part of our official table. She was clapping, a fixed plastic smile plastered on her face. Her eyes were vacant. I accepted the heavy crystal award. It was solid. It was real. I stepped up to the microphone, my heart pounding so hard I was sure the entire room could hear it. "Thank you." I managed, my voice shaking just a little. Wow, I I really did not prepare a speech for this. I looked out at the sea of faces, colleagues, competitors, clients, my team, my father. A little over 6 months ago, I began my voice finding its strength. At a party in this very neighborhood, someone I respected told me that I was just good with my hands. I was told I was a technician, a worker. I was told that I wasn't the brain, and that a legacy, needed a brain to lead it, not hands. I saw Valerie flinch. I saw my father look down at the tablecloth. I looked down at my team in the front row. I said, gesturing to Miguel and Aisha, who were both watching me with tears in their eyes, "These are the hands of my company. They are the most brilliant, skilled, and dedicated artisans I have ever known. This award, this is for them." The room applauded warmly. "There is a dangerous idea in business," I continued, my voice growing stronger, filling the ballroom. "We worship the idea people, the visionaries, the brains. We are taught that the person who has the idea is the genius, and the person who actually builds it is just labor. We're told that the person who can talk about the design is more valuable than the person who can execute it." I leaned closer to the microphone. "I am standing here tonight to tell you that is a lie. Ideas are nothing. They are fleeting. They are cheap. Ideas are vapors. They are nothing without the skill, the craft, the grit, the hands to bring them into the real world. Never, ever underestimate the people who are just good with their hands." I held up the award. "This award isn't for having a brain. It's for having the guts to believe in the value of the work itself. It's for every late night, every splinter, every technical problem, every single person who actually makes the beautiful things the city celebrates." I looked down at my own hands, no longer raw and blistered, but still strong, still a maker's hands. Because hands can build empires, and a true brain knows exactly what those hands are worth. The applause was a tidal wave. It washed over me, a validation so total, so public, it almost brought me to my knees. Ms. Devereux was beaming her applause, sharp and proud. The entire room was standing. I held the crystal award high. My gaze found my father. He was standing, his face streaked with tears he wasn't bothering to wipe away. He wasn't crying for his lost company. He wasn't crying for his broken pride. He was clapping, his eyes locked on mine, and for the first time in my 31 years, he was crying because he was proud. I had won. Not just the award, I had won everything. On my own terms. The core lesson is about recognizing your own value, especially within a toxic family dynamic. Kayla's story shows that true worth isn't defined by the limiting roles others assign you, like being the hands instead of the brain. It's defined by your own competence, resilience, and integrity. While her family exploited her, her mentor protected her. This teaches us to build our own security, like Kayla's MBA and legal protections, and align with those who see our true potential. Success isn't just winning, it's reclaiming your narrative, proving that hands, guided by a sharp brain, can build an empire. Share your story in the comments about a time you had to stand up to a toxic family member and reclaim your power.